Hey everyone, David here, and welcome to a very early review of the new DC. Guys and gals, just a quick reminder before you watch this video, do not forget to subscribe for more content such as this, and if you do so, please click the little bell symbol right next to the subscribe button. You'll get notifications on your phone, on your tablet, and on your laptop for when you can get more content from this beautiful face once more. What the fuck? What's that about? Okay. Anyways, where was I? Alright, yeah. So it kind of pays to be an Amazon Prime member. In a very stunning turn of events, Amazon paired up with DC and Warner Brothers to give Amazon Prime members an exclusive early access screening to Aquaman about 6 days early, so it's not terribly early. It's not like screeners, like movie reviewers or stuff like that. But if you happen to have an Amazon Prime account and you also download the Atom app, then on December 15th, there was a 7 o'clock showing throughout various participant theaters that were actually able to show an early screening of Aquaman. I managed to act right on time and appropriately, and I managed to see Aquaman a little earlier than the general public. And so here we have my initial review starting. Why does that keep happening? Alright, and surprisingly, my mic is not affected by any of this. So the Warner Brothers DC comic book movie train continues to steam on through, this time without the group ensemble that they tried to reverse engineer from their competition, aka the Avengers. So they decided to flip it on its head and have the original group up team movie be at the beginning, and now we're getting all of our spin-off movies with individual storylines. And basically we're in sort of a DC purgatory, to be quite completely frank with you. We're in a DC purgatory where DC, along with Warner Brothers, doesn't exactly know how to really address whether it be the universe, and I can't remember what the universe is called. I know they came up with a brand new term for the DC cinematic universe, and I can't remember it off the top of my head, but I know that they're trying to rebrand themselves, kind of bring everything back to where it's supposed to be, so that then they can have a full and fair fight against Marvel. Because don't get me wrong, as much as I love Marvel, I love Marvel cake. Marvel does it right with their setups, sure, and their team up movies. Infinity War definitely proved that, and it looks like Endgame's gonna do the same. That in no way, shape, or form means that I want DC to fail. I want DC to succeed. Just like I want Xbox to succeed despite being a PlayStation and, I gotta be honest, recently a Switch guy because Smash Bros. Is taking up an awful lot of my time. It's just that right now, like I said, we're in a bit of a limbo when it comes to DC, where you have participants from those group up movies with Justice League or Batman vs Superman, aka Jason Momoa reprising his role as Aquaman, but at the same time they're one-offs. They might have like a reference or two to Justice League, but they're one-offs. And the one-off this time centering around the social media titled Aquaman, which is Arthur Curry, trying to do his own thing in his own part of the world. And yeah, he does the things that are technically right, but he doesn't really do them for his own benefit, and he's kind of gruff in that sense, and he's just trying to mind his own business while at the same time protecting anything that has to do with marine life. All of a sudden, Princess Mira appears from Atlantis and tells him that he needs to go back to Atlantis so that then he can do kind of like the inverted version of the Black Panther story, where he's actually the outsider coming towards the kingdom and challenging the king for the throne to make sure that everything is going right, because King Orm has a very sinister plan to wage war against the surface world, but not without his merits. And that's essentially the core outline that, like I said, does feel a little bit familiar with Black Panther, but it's not to say that Black Panther originated. I mean, my girlfriend makes comparisons of Black Panther with Lion King, so who's to say who copied who at this point? What I thought was a little interesting was actually the backstory behind some of these characters residing within Atlantis that takes on arguably the most comic booky approach to its source material, just like we had recently with Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse embracing that really crazy multiverse. This one does it with just how I don't want to say over the top, but just very pulpy and very, and I like to throw that word around a lot, and I'm sorry for it, but it really is pulp in the sense of the panels from the comic book from the 1930s or 1940s kind of leaping into real life here in this movie with the design of Atlantis, the design of the characters and their architecture and their technology and goddamn costumes that look incredibly ridiculous, but for some reason I buy it in a very weird way, where is everything that the characters utilize in this movie, even with Aquaman himself, the weapons that he used, the way he looks, particularly towards the end where that iconic suit kind of comes back, for some reason I want to say it doesn't work, but yet it does in a very charming way. And that's because this movie is not afraid to embrace that craziness that sometimes the world of Atlantis and the Aquaman comic books would do from those panels. I'm not necessarily calling myself a huge Aquaman guy. I'm not going to claim to read every single book, but it doesn't really take a genius or a comic book aficionado to really tell that from the imagery that you see in this movie, from the costume designs to the design work over Atlantis. All of that is very integral, and at the same time it's treated with a care that doesn't feel cynical, in the sense where it's just like, oh yeah, we're making fun by making this super over the top. No, it's like, we're making this over the top because that's where its heart lies. And I'm like, all right, that's actually something I can kind of respect. And in that respect, the movie doesn't necessarily become as dark and dire as its pioneering movies did, like Man of Steel or, God forbid, Batman vs. Superman. And by that measure, it's already kind of coming up top because of that. It's something that also Wonder Woman kind of excelled at, treating Themyscira with care, with its mythology, with its lore, the story behind the women of Themyscira, my apologies. And then the same thing can kind of be said about the world of Atlantis and the lore behind its kings, its queens, its mythology, and how Arthur fits into that whole pedigree. And Arthur himself, played by Jason Momoa, he does a good job as the Aquaman. He definitely brings the much needed badassery that some guy wearing an orange and green suit, or at least not necessarily the orange and green suit you see in this movie, because the one in this movie is actually kind of cool looking. I'm talking about that original ghillie one. It takes a guy like Jason Momoa to make Aquaman pretty badass. That's not to say that he didn't find his own level of badassery in other mediums, such as Injustice the video games. Those are great, and even the spin-off comic books from those games, they treat Aquaman very well. But Jason Momoa was able to bring his own kind of version to the character, where he's very reluctant to do anything that's really in the grandiose sense. He likes to really take care of the minor stuff that's going on in the seas, whether it be piracy or whaling or stuff like that. But it's cool. One of the really fun aspects about the script and the writing that was done here is that they kind of took some of that and flipped it inside out with other characters that kind of string together with Arthur's little motives going on in this movie, where he's just trying to keep to himself. King Orm is actually not a bad villain. I'm not going to say he's one of the most compelling villains ever. I think Killmonger can still maybe take, or even Thanos will probably do a little bit better with that, but it's cool that they gave him a somewhat justifiable moment, because he brings up the concept of pollution and whaling and all these things that humans do kind of fuck up the ocean in that sense. And so it's kind of hard to make arguments against them when he brings up those points. It's just that his approach and Patrick Wilson's performance is a little by the book when it comes to playing that kind of top tier villain. Similar thing could be said about Amber Heard as Princess Mira. I was expecting to hate her. Thankfully, not really. I think she's fine. She wasn't anything that different or new. She has her moments where she's kind of like just the love interest, and it hurts me to say that, because I feel like we have progressed in time far enough to kind of get away from that. But there's moments where she's like that, and there's other moments where she keeps to her own, and she's got actually a pretty interesting power. But I'm a little worried about that power that she has, because it kind of reminds me of another power that Aquaman himself has. And I'll reiterate, I'm not a huge Aquaman expert here, so one of the things that me and my girlfriend were kind of talking about is I wish that a little bit of the rules about which Atlantean can do what can be a little cleaned up here, because sometimes their powers will kind of fluctuate. They're kind of cool, interesting to see the way that they made them badass, but a little bit of explanation behind those rules would have been probably done by some kind of cipher. Now, I'm not saying a comic relief, but at least a secondary character who's kind of analyzing. There's also some side roles here that were actually rather interesting and neat, played by good character actors. Willem Dafoe making the transition from Marvel's Green Goblin over here to now DC with the Aquaman movie as this kind of like advisor type character that I kind of knew how he was going to play out and his arc in the story, but Willem Dafoe made him likable, made him cool, made him a very interesting guy. And then we also had Nicole Kidman, who's like, wow, this is her year. Boy Erased, getting some potential Oscar buzz for a movie called Destructor, where she looks, oh my god. And now she's got Aquaman under her belt. So she did a good job here. I just wish I could say the similar things for Mr. Black Manta. Oh my god. This is the one guy I cannot move on past the performances without mentioning this guy. This is the guy that would remind me that James Wan, who directed this movie, and is obviously one of the appealing factors about the movie, because James Wan has created a reputation for himself for directing horror. He brought us the first Saw movie. Since then, he gave us the Conjuring universe with Annabelle, The Conjuring, The Nun, all these different movies, whether he directed them himself or he produced the Insidious movies. And this is not necessarily his first action blockbuster. He did kind of delve into that with Furious 7, which I thought was a guilty pleasure of mine. And of course, a lot of people will love it because it's got that sentimental ending to Paul Walker's character. Aquaman, on the other hand, there's definitely his signature style to it in terms of the action and the camera tricks. I mentioned this in my impression video that he knows how to work the camera. So when you get some action in this movie, you get some rather cool and incredible action. And I'm glad that he's able to have an eye for how to work the camera during certain scenes that will go on for a good tracking shot that is genuinely moving and gripping because of its way that's able to move around the room while at the same time captivating your central character, performing their actions, and not quick cutting all the time. And even when there's quick cuts, you can still see what's going on. And it's cool that he was able to get with his stunt coordinators and their fight experts and all that stuff to develop a particular style that would fit not only Aquaman but also the Atlanteans and how they would fight with each other and use their technology very effectively. And there's some really great sequences here where they utilize those hand-to-hand combats, and it's cool. I just wish that maybe he would polish up a little bit on his dramatic direction towards actors, and that was very much apparent by the way that the guy playing Black Manta would perform. Let's just say that he has this moments of pure and utter Shakespearean heft. If you couldn't already tell, I'm being sarcastic. He was actually kind of bad at times. He was overacting as a motherfucker. And I was just like, all right, dude, just come on, just put on the suit, do your thing, and let's get out of here. Because, oh my God. And on that front, it might just, hopefully I don't get on a touchy subject here, but I feel like it might just be a culture thing because James Wan, I think he's Japanese, or I'm pretty certain he's Japanese. I might be completely wrong about that. Might be completely wrong. But because he is from the East, maybe his sense of humor that he thinks that maybe American people is a little different than what we've kind of, are used to now. Because going back to my comment about how Princess Mira had her moments where she was a little bit like just a love interest, and she had her moments where she has to hold Aquaman's hand, or she has to, do like a touch, but it's unexpected and it's like that, shit from like the early 2000s. Oh my God, the humor in this movie is from the early 2000s. At moments, it felt a little cringe-worthy, and I was expecting a laugh track to pop in. Swear to God, there's some sitcom humor in this movie that may have made the entire rest of the room laugh, but not me. And that sucks because for a good while, I was saying to myself, yeah, it was embracing this comic book aesthetic so hard with its visuals and its design, especially towards the end where it's nothing but CGI, but I can't get too mad at it, except for a couple of spotty spots. There's a moment ever so often where it reminds myself, like, man, visual effects artists can still not capture underwater effects. After all this time, we really can't do it, because there's some really bad floating heads in this movie. Some really bad ones. They're a little scarce, though. So when we get to the very CG heavy climax, there's something endearing about the models and designs and the overall look of some of the creatures used in the climax. One in particular, I looked at it and I said, I want to fight that thing right now. Give me the controller right now. And it was cool from that perspective. But what I was saying earlier is that the movie was embracing so much of this nature, but I was noticing that weren't really cracking so many jokes. And I was like, okay, well, a step further, and I guess I can consider this somewhat of a dark superhero, because it's like, well, there's no jokes, there's no sense of levity. There's so many big bombastic looks to this movie that it's like, okay, at some point you gotta embrace the good nature of some jokes, of some humor. And I'm like, wow, it's been a while. There's been no humor to this whatsoever. It's been taken super seriously. So then when the humor came in, that's where I'm like, all right, you know what? Maybe you should just go back to being serious, because the way these actors are directed to kind of make some of the humor, like I said, it feels very, very, very sitcom. However, I can still not get mad at this movie. And to be truthfully honest, I'll still take this over Batman vs. Superman. Batman vs. Superman was just taking up too much time. What Aquaman has writing on its side is how simplistic it is in its story, to where it's like, okay, we're not going to involve the Justice League. In fact, there's only like one reference to what happened in Justice League. Beyond that, though, it's its own simple story centering around Arthur and the entire mythology behind Atlantis, Arthur's character, how he fits into the story, and all these cool visuals coupled with some of the cool camera tricks that James Wan was able to provide, made for a movie that's definitely better than most superhero movies, or most superhero movies that started off on the very wrong foot that DC in fact did. I'll just say, though, that it has its moments where it kind of reminded me of Venom. Even though Venom is the more cynical cousin to Aquaman, Aquaman still suffered from that, from those moments that felt, like I said, from the early 2000s superhero movies like Daredevil and Fantastic Four, or whatever else we had, Ang Lee's Hulk or whatever, those early, Ghost Rider even. There's even some music placements here and there that I'm like, why are we playing this? Why is this playing? It's not the worst thing, it's not the most ear-bleeding thing ever, but why is it playing? So even though I can't get on board to say this is as good as maybe Wonder Woman, I think Wonder Woman is still the standard for what DC can maybe do with these one-off movies that don't necessarily have to connect to every single thing. It's still one of the better ones that I can say had an endearing quality to it, that I looked at and said, you know what, I'm glad I saw that. And getting to see it a little bit early definitely doesn't hurt. So I'm going to be giving Aquaman a low 8 out of 10. Some things in there that could have been polished up a little bit better, whether it be on the technical side with the visual effects, and certain spots with the underwater effects, and then of course from the script, or from the phase of the movie where you have to decide on a little bit of a tone, where it's like, oh yeah, it's been a while since we had a joke, put in sitcom humor here. No, you need to balance it all out, and of course that's all starts with the script. There's some really great moments in the script, but I think like somebody might have rewrote it in a way, or James Wan looked at it from a different cultural perspective than what probably the rest of us are kind of accustomed to in a superhero movie from time to time. With that said, however, let me know in the comments below. Well, it's a little early, so if you did manage to get into the Amazon Prime screening of Aquaman, let me know in the comments what you thought, what your favorite moments are, or what's your prediction for the remaining timeline of the DC Cinematic Universe. Again, I can't remember what it's called, but please let me know in the comments. However, if you have not seen Aquaman yet and you're waiting for the official release, let me know what are your expectations going in, either before watching this review or after. Also, make sure to show your support for the video by hitting the like and share button. Show your support for the channel by hitting subscribe. And also hit the notification button so you know when I'm either live during a game stream or posting a brand new video. Until next time, guys, thank you so much for watching. Catch you later. And yes, the show still has that very Saturday morning cartoon feel based on its frenetic pacing, the way it just kind of quickly transitions from one shot to the next, and then you also have that bombastic music and the way the characters also tell their lines.
Shocker! You can't escape me! I'll chase you to the ends of the earth!